I'll ask the first question. Tim, you're affiliated with David Huell, correct?
Right.
In Spaceship. How does what you do affiliate with David Huell in Spaceship Earth?
I'm the co-founder of the organization and the co-author of the book. David was a guest lecturer, and the future in residence at Ringling, and we've taught several classes together, and so that's how we got together and decided we needed to write the book.
Okay, yeah. Great. So some other questions we have is, Battery Co-op came to Sarasota, and will businesses be eligible? Question.
Okay. Currently, Battery Co-op, we are piloting solar and battery co-op in the state of Maryland because there are other state incentives there, and we're looking to expand that outside of other states. We're going to wait and see how that data works, see the turnout and the success of that. The issue currently with a lot of that battery co-op is supply and demand. So the demand is much bigger than the supply at this point, but a lot of the batteries are catching up. So we're going to wait and see on that, and we would love to bring a battery co-op to Sarasota. There is a timeline and capacity. Businesses, most of our co-ops are open to nonprofits and small businesses, and then it's really up to the installer if that qualifies in their policy and their rate structures with the co-op format. And we always give preference to homeowners in case it's a larger business or a large number of businesses in the co-op.
And Tim, I think the next question was for you. It says, was the 129-degree temperature measured? I believe that was in your presentation. Or where? I'm sorry, where?
This was in Pakistan and Iran during a heat wave this past summer. And then along the Gulf Coast in their area was where you had the heat index of 149 degrees. Yeah.
I'll ask another question. In terms of the solar power, a lot of people have the overwhelming sense of there's that old school math that a lot of people do and they price out solar for their home. Can you help somebody overcome that math and they look at the recovery, the return on investment analysis? How do you all make a difference in that?
Well, the solar co-op, because it's a group purchase, it's a bulk purchase, we bring a lot of value to an installer. So that sales and acquisition portion is reduced, and we're bringing an informed body group to an installer. So we're generally seeing extremely competitive pricing through the solar co-op, but we also stress the support, the technology, and the quality equipment. So the costing, we're really helping them figure out the general costing, obviously depending on their size, but how net metering works, that basic formula, and then they can work with the installer to price out how much they want to offset in their rate of return.
Excellent. A question for Christine. Christine, when it comes to the book Drawdown, this is from me, not from there, but when it comes to the book Drawdown, what do you see, what kind of advice could you give a local government to say, based on all the different things that book looked at, what could a local government do? What would you recommend that they look at first?
So there's a list in the back of the book of the top solutions. They list them by the most efficient to the least efficient. So that would be a good place to start. And I know a lot of the governments here already are aware of this. And so they're using the channels that they have locally to start with some of those solutions. But, you know, it's a group effort, and so, you know, looking at what makes sense for the governments and looking at what we can do kind of as a community, doing our part, what they can do for their part as well.
Great. Oh, please, go ahead.
So I should know the number. I think it's about a dozen, and most of them are members of the Science and Environment Council, and that's how they found out about it. If you're interested, come see me. We are definitely looking to expand at some point. Again, the group is really new, so a lot of these conversations still have to be had with the larger group, but definitely come talk to us.
And I have one question for Sean as well. Sean, I'm involved actually in the faith-based community. And what advice would you give somebody like who's a youth pastor or something like that, and they have students that want to get involved in environmental issues and make a difference, but also still they're loyal to their faith, obviously. So what advice would you give somebody, or what avenues are local that students can be involved in that are faith-based?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources at the national level for faith-based curriculums. I mean, I think ultimately any kind of social change starts with education and the idea of education for action. So tapping into some of those resources, I think for the consciousness-raising portion of it would be a great place to start. I think in terms of specific actions, you know, in Sarasota, there's the work of the Climate Justice Coalition and Ready for 100, and we're interested in expanding the footprint of that. But I think to Christine's point, I mean, there's a lot of ways to get people to take that first step of action. And so there may be some kind of project that could be done around the church. There may be something that could be done in a school, whether it's, you know, a sample wetland or a solar installation. I mean, it can really vary in scale. And I think the other important thing to it is connecting it with some global sense of what the scope of the challenges are, what people in other areas are facing that may have less material privilege, what are some of those challenges, and trying to link it with a justice and equity perspective.
It's great. It's great advice. Well, let's give it up for our, oh, I'm sorry, one more question. Ma'am, go ahead. Oh, they're not? Well, let me run around. You had a question. I'll be guy running around the mic here. Really got to kind of.
So, given that our upcoming administration, our Florida administration, senatorial and gubernatorial, are both climate change deniers, what is the best way to kind of force them to start, administering like a sustainable policy, when obviously there's a need and a huge concern about this?
Probably everybody has some thoughts on it. I can just share mine real quick. I think we have to look at the ballot initiatives. You know, we just passed Amendment 4 in the state of Florida to restore voting rights to people with felony convictions in their backgrounds, and that passed with over 60% of the votes. We passed the land conservation ballot initiative, though that's had its own problems. But I'm not sure, what the path forward through the legislature is at that point. The other option, which I mentioned in my talk, is to actually hold the corporations accountable themselves. And I think there's a lot that can be done there. There's successful case studies, in other areas on other issues for how that can work. But by no means is any of this going to be easy or particularly quick. It's going to require a lot of tenacity, I think, and persistence.
Regarding solar, I'm wondering what efforts are being done to convert over larger organizations like condo associations that have rooftops, but it's a whole association that would have to convert over. You want that one?
In one of the processes that they're using in Orlando, they have the advantage that Orlando runs its own electricity system, is they're taking some of their larger water bodies and they are rafting solar panels on those and then specifically selling the equivalent kilowatt usage from those panels to the residents of condominiums and taller towers where you can't get enough solar panels right now on the roof to match all the demand of that building, but you can use other sites, and they're doing similar things with landfill covers being done with solar power, so that it's looking for those other opportunities. So that one group, so you're not leaving out a group just because the physical structures have been designed in such a way that it's inconvenient for them. So yeah.
Yeah, it really varies on condos and homeowners and group structures like that. If you own your own roof and you own your own meter, there's a lot more options there. But a lot of these group constructions, it has to do with community solar, which is technically really not allowed in the state of Florida. So only a utility can technically sell power. So that is a bigger issue on how we can virtual net meter and use advanced community solar to help more people, would be a legislative move.
I wanted to share with especially Sean, did you know that a carbon pricing bill was introduced in the U.S. House on Tuesday? It's called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividends Bill, and it was a bipartisan introduction by 3 Florida legislators Francis Rooney, Ted Deutsch, and Charlie Crist, Democrat from Maryland and a Republican from Pennsylvania. So for what you can do, you can call your representatives and ask them to support this proposal. This is huge. The bill number is 7173.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And Citizens Climate Lobby is the organization locally that people can plug into to support that carbon pricing initiative.
We're going to have one last question here. Ma'am, do you have a question? Do you have a question? Do you have a question?
About doing a ballot initiative, and in Sarasota County, it also passed that we have to do 10% of the populace instead of 5%. That's how we got the other ones on the ballot. So how is that statewide, or what's the solution to that?
I'm not exactly sure what the statewide threshold it is. Julia might have more knowledge. It requires a lot of,
I mean, 10% is huge because
Yeah.
and they only give you 18 months to get that 10%. It's not like it's unlimited like before. It was 5.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a larger conversation there about how a lot of the mechanisms of democracy right now are being restricted. And at the very moment that we're facing our greatest existential threat, our political system is the least equipped to deal with it. And that's why ultimately I only see movements being what can take us through that constriction.
It doesn't seem like it's much of a solution. That's just
I think it just means it's a tougher solution to achieve, but what are the alternatives,
Well, given we have to stay on schedule, I want to thank the panel. Let's give them a round of applause. And I apologize, the questions weren't working. If you actually want to grab them before they leave and get your question answered, I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to you.